Rose's recent trip to Vietnam. Well, tonight on The Price of Freedom, the first of several stories we will tell you from his trip. The fighting in the American war in Vietnam ended almost 50 years ago. Still, actions by Americans decades ago are still causing serious harm to people in Vietnam today.
When you hear someone mention Vietnam, what comes to mind? Is it the country's beaches? How about scooters zooming around city centers? Maybe it's traditions and culture. Or do your thoughts look more like this? Images from a war that ended nearly 50 years ago.
Something I hope that people get out of maybe this experience is more of an understanding that, to put it quite bluntly, Vietnam is a country, not a war.
In the summer of 1995, the relationship between the U.S. and Vietnam was officially normalized, and the U.S. opened the embassy in Hanoi. President Biden visited Vietnam last year to mark a new era of elevated relations as the two countries entered into a comprehensive strategic partnership.
It is a country that has endured more war than the people ever should have to. But it's also a country that, again, once the fighting was done, was very, very willing to put aside the hard feelings and welcome back even foreign aggressors as friends.
Vietnam's census status shows this is a very young country. About a quarter of the population, 15 years old and younger. 65 and up, that's less than 6% of the population. America's war here in Vietnam ended almost 50 years ago. Still, that war is having a giant impact on Vietnam today.
The drones of Agent Orange that were stored at places like Da Nang Air Base, Bien Hoa Air Base, and it seeps into the soil. This stuff gets into the groundwater, and it gets into the food chain and the fish, and people eat it, and it affects unborn children.
During our 6 days in Vietnam, we heard about the issues that still exist today due to exposure to Agent Orange and other dioxins. We also heard about other serious problems that still linger all these years after the American war in Vietnam.
And nowadays we still facing with a lot of difficulties from the war aftermath, like landmines, like unexploded ordnance.
The most robust conversation on these topics happened here with Vietnamese veterans who fought in the war against the United States.
A lot of children, lost their fathers.
Ian Trun with Vietnam Union of Friendship Organizations served as translator during the conversation.
We understand the challenges that still remain. We were talking in the ride over here that legacy of war challenges are just something that will remain a part of this relationship with Vietnam moving forward. But we look forward to continuing to cooperate both to address the issues of the past in a respectful manner, but also to build a better, more prosperous future.
The U.S. delegation in this meeting included family members of Medal of Honor recipient Sergeant Rodney Davis, who was killed in action a little more than an hour's drive from this room. The other Americans here included retired military officers.
I've learned over the years that the legacies and the scars of war last for generations. And yes, those of us in this room have a deep responsibility to address all of those things. But I think one of the most important responsibilities that we share is preparing the next generation, the younger generation, to continue to address all of those things.
The afternoon started sitting at long tables, Americans on one side looking across a spacious room at Vietnamese veterans and families on the other, at times hearing hard truths. But the day didn't end that way. It ended like this, small tables, shoulder to shoulder, sharing a meal, a conversation, and hopefully a bit of healing, with a shift in perspective on that war that ended all those decades ago. From Da Nang, Vietnam, Josh Rowe, Fox Chattanooga.
And the last person you heard from in that story, Chattanooga native and retired Army Colonel Jeremy Bowley. If you want to watch that full discussion between the delegation from the U.S. and Vietnamese veterans, you can find it on Josh Rowe's YouTube page. And we still have so much more to show you from his trip, and none of these would be possible without our sponsor of this trip, Food City.
Thanks for making News Channel 9 your trusted source for local news. For updates and the latest on breaking news, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications.